When my husband brought that baby home from the war, I couldn't bear to look at him. I didn't want to see those brown stranger's eyes staring up at me. I prayed to the gods. Take him away. Make him die. I'd condemned this poor, innocent child to a horrible death. All because I was jealous of his mother. So I prayed to all 7 gods. Let the boy live. Let him live. And I'll love him. And he lived. And I couldn't keep my promise.
Jon Snow and Catelyn Stark are 2 characters that don't really get compared all that often due to their difficult relationship at Winterfell. Jon, being the bastard son of Ned Stark, is a sore spot in Lady Catelyn's life, and because of that, there isn't really any love between the 2 of them. With Lady Catelyn going as far as to wish Jon himself was the one who got paralyzed and not Bran, and Catelyn actively hoping Jon would join the Night's Watch just to get him out of her sight. And this tense relationship has led a lot of fans to absolutely despise Catelyn Stark, and due to this emotional response, overlook the blatant parallels between the 2 seemingly different characters. And today, I'm here to talk about just how similar these 2 tragic characters really are. With the first set of similarities popping up in each other's respective first POV chapter. In Catelyn 1, A Game of Thrones, she talks about how even though she's lived at Winterfell for well over a decade, she still feels out of place. Like no matter how good she has it or how much her family grows, she will always be an outsider. She even goes as far as to pray differently than the rest of her family and tell Ned directly that even though the Godswoods should be a sign of comfort for her as a Stark, the Weirwood trees make her feel uneasy rather than safe. And Jon's opening chapter is much the same. Jon 1, A Game of Thrones has Jon sitting in the back of Winterfell during a feast. And in this chapter, Jon very much echoes the same feelings about Winterfell and the Stark family that Catelyn does, stating countless times how he feels like he's an outsider, and always will be. That while the rest of his half-brothers and sisters get praise and affection, he gets forgotten about, tossed to the back of the hall like some commoner. And what's important to note here is both characters actively blame the other for a portion of their respective loneliness. Jon often speaks about how Catelyn's eyes seemed to look through him. He had nothing he could say to her, nothing he dared say. He felt his anger rising. Catelyn had never said a word to him, all the years he had lived at Winterfell, but he had seen the look in her eyes, and she was looking at him now. While on the other hand, Catelyn often thinks about how Jon is the manifestation of her husband's infidelity, that she must look at every day of her life. He had ridden off with Robert to war, and returned with another woman's son. That cut deep. Ned would not speak of the mother, not so much as a word, but a woman knows. I will never forget the look on his face when he brought Jon home to Winterfell. He would not speak her name, yet he would not send the boy away. He brought his bastard home, and insisted that he be raised among his trueborn children, just as if he were a Stark. So in their opening POVs, the way in which these 2 characters are far more similar to one another than they know is plain to see. But this is just scratching the surface. As the story progresses, Jon Snow and Catelyn Stark's parallels and similarities only increase. The next one that I want to bring up is their scars. Jon Snow and Catelyn Stark have the same exact scars, with both having an injured hand or hands. Early on in A Game of Thrones, while Catelyn is watching over a sleeping Bran, an attacker wielding a Valyrian steel dagger tries to kill Bran in his sleep and ends up slicing deep into the hands of Lady Catelyn when she herself grabs hold of the blade in order to protect her son. This leaves her with lifelong scars across both of her hands and nerve damage that she has to actively work through. And it's important to note a few things regarding this attack. Number 1, Catelyn obtains these injuries by trying to protect someone she cares about. Number 2, she only escapes with her life due to the fact that a direwolf showed up to help her. And number 3, for the remainder of the story, she will often fixate and talk about her injured hands as almost like a therapeutic reminder of her previous experiences and trauma. Now, at the end of Book 1 of Game of Thrones, Jon Snow receives a very similar injury in a very similar way. In the late of night, while Jorah Mormont is sleeping, a White Walker attacks and tries to kill him. And Jon Snow puts himself in harm's way by fighting the White with the help of Ghost, and then grabbing a pile of curtains and a lantern that are on fire in order to burn the White Walker. And like Catelyn, there are 3 things to take note of here. Number 1, Jon obtains this injury to his hand by trying to protect someone that he cares about. Number 2, he only escapes with his life due to the help of his direwolf Ghost. And number 3, for the remainder of the series, Jon will often flex and fixate on his burnt sword hand, almost as if it's a therapeutic reminder of what he's been through. But it doesn't just end there, regarding the similarities between the 2 characters in terms of scars. After Catelyn Stark is resurrected as Lady Stoneheart, she has these claw marks going down her eyes and cheekbones. She obtains these right before she dies at the end of the Red Wedding due to the fact that she was clawing at her own eyes. And Jon Snow, after a brutal encounter with a warged eagle, also has very similar gashes and scars running down his face. And to take this a step further, the fan arts of a resurrected Jon Snow kind of resemble similar features to Lady Stoneheart. With eyes that can look through one's soul, white hair, and deep red cuts down their faces. Speaking of death and resurrection, that's the next similarity between the 2 characters. And even the circumstances for how the 2 characters die are very similar. Catelyn Stark is betrayed and killed at the Red Wedding by people that she was supposed to be able to rely on. Jon Snow is betrayed and killed at the Wall by people that he was supposed to be able to rely on. Not only that, but what gets them to this place is also very similar. If you ask 100 fans where Catelyn Stark goes wrong in her character arc, most likely they will tell you it's putting her daughters first and breaking rules and laws in order to try and get them home. And funny enough, what ends up getting Jon Snow ultimately killed is putting his family first, specifically Arya, and breaking his vows and the rules of the Night's Watch in order to try and save her. Beyond that, it's also borderline canon that Jon Snow will be resurrected and brought back from the dead. And can you guess who the only other POV character to be brought back to life is? Catelyn Stark. Now the next part that I'm about to bring up is genuinely insane. Ygritte resembles Catelyn Stark. In our own world, research suggests that men tend to be attracted to women who share physical and personality traits with their mothers. This tendency is often linked to the concept of sexual imprinting, where individuals develop preferences for partners based on early childhood experiences, particularly with their parents. And while it's not a universal phenomenon, studies indicate a statistically significant tendencies for men to be drawn to women who resemble their mothers, especially in terms of facial features and personality traits. And this concept actually matches a lot about Jon Snow and Ygritte's relationship. Evidence number 1, both Catelyn Stark and Ygritte have red hair. Number 2, both Catelyn and Ygritte symbolize women in Jon's life that he believes he can't have affection for. Catelyn Stark because he's a bastard, and Ygritte because he's a man of the Night's Watch and she's a wildling. Evidence number 3. Jon often looks and describes Ygritte's eyes, sometimes describing them as if they and she is haunting him, much like how he describes Lady Catelyn's eyes and how they haunt him. But moving on from that crazy bit of information, I want to actually explain why Jon Snow embodies the House Tully words more than any of Catelyn's true-born children. The Tully words are family, duty, honor, in that specific order. And Jon Snow values those things more than anything else in his life, also in that very specific order. First, let's go over the family part. Jon Snow values his family over everything else. No matter how hard he tries to deny it, it's true. Which is what ultimately gets him killed in A Dance with Dragons, Chapter 13. He places more importance on his love for his sister Arya than his duty to the men and to the Night's Watch. But Jon does really care about duty as well. That's why he's at the Night's Watch and Lord Commander in the first place. He has a duty to the Night's Watch and to his men. And finally, we have honor. And honor is something that Jon does deeply care for, but he also admits that honor is something that can change, something that it's important to have perspective on. Which is why, even though it's important, it's not the most important. And Catelyn Stark is someone who also believes in these values above all else. She always put her family, her love for her children, above her duty, and above her honor. This doesn't mean that she forgot about them or neglected them, but she definitely did have priorities, just like Jon. So at this point, I think it should be fairly obvious that Jon Snow and Catelyn Stark are very similar characters that go on very similar arcs. I mean, hell, they even share in being quite sassy and judgy. And with that being said, the most natural question is, why? And aside from just general irony, I think there is an actual explanation for this seemingly weird phenomenon where a child ended up like someone who hardly spoke to him. With the main reason being, children adapt to the emotional ecosystem that they're born into. Children don't become who they are in a vacuum. They respond to the emotional environment around them, even when that environment is hostile. In psychology, this is known as adaptive mirroring. Children will sometimes unconsciously internalize the traits of the person who withholds love, not because they admire them, but because it's a matter of survival. Jon didn't try to become like Catelyn because he admired her. He became like her because he was trying to understand her, to win her over, and survive emotionally in a house where her coldness shaped his everyday. So what happens when one of the only adults in your home constantly judges, avoids, or resents you? You watch them, you study them, and you become sharp, introspective, and sensitive to tone and emotion, like Jon. And in that process, you can absorb the personality traits without realizing it, like Jon does with Catelyn. Furthermore, many people think that trauma makes someone become the opposite of their abuser or the neglectful figure in their life. But trauma often creates echoes, not opposites. A child who grows up around emotionally distant people might become the very thing that caused the pain and emotional distance in the first place. Or they will grow into a warped reflection of it, especially if there was no other model to follow. In Jon Snow's case, he tried to be Ned, but deep down he knew he was never going to be allowed to. He was always held at an arm's length. So instead, without knowing it, he became a version of Catelyn Stark. Stiff, dutiful, emotionally walled off, fiercely loyal, a tendency to be bitter, spiteful, and sassy, and deeply haunted by his past. And to end this video off, I want to leave you all with this. From a storytelling perspective, George R.R. Martin loves his cruel symmetry and cruel parallels. And Jon Snow, becoming the true embodiment of House Tully's words, more than any of Catelyn's true-born children, is the kind of irony that he loves to implement into his stories. Family, duty, and honor. That is Jon Snow. But it's also Catelyn Stark. Both of them put family before reason. Both let loyalty drive them into death, and both were betrayed by the people that they fought so hard to protect. And in the end, the boy that she never spoke to became the man who will carry on her legacy more than anyone else.